This is Ray Stokes in the oral history section of the Health Sciences Library of the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. Today, this is the 11th day of September 1985. I have a very fine friend of mine, former president of the Texas Osteopathic Medical Association, who was instrumental in the establishment and construction of the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. We're in the office, or the conference room, I should say, of the Texas Osteopathic Medical Association, 226 Bailey Avenue in Fort Worth. I'd like to introduce Dr. Bobby G. Smith, who was president of the association in the year 1970-71, and one of those responsible for our being today and saying that we're proud to be the 7th College of Osteopathic Medicine, the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. And we're very happy to discuss your part in this project that we were so happy about back in 1968, 69, and 70. Dr. Smith, you are a GP in Arlington, been very active in state politics and also professional politics. The last few years, I believe, though, you've taken kind of a back seat, so it's good to be with you this morning. Dr. Smith, let me just start our conversation by asking you just a basic question, and you take it from there. When and under what circumstances did you become interested in supporting the establishment of TCOM?
Well, Ray, let me say that I'm happy to be here to assist you in recording whatever minute contribution I may have made to the college, which I guess over the years only time will tell. I first became aware of the college, I suppose, while I was still in my training. I graduated in 1962 from the Kirksville College and came to Grand Prairie to intern at Mid-Cities Memorial Hospital at that time, was called, from 62 to 63. And so it was because I was close by that I guess I became aware of some of the things that were going on, and being a sort of a person who always believed that it's better to give than to receive everything, that my father once told me that when you're gone from this earth, if it's said of you that you took more than or that you give more than you took, then your journey here was worthwhile. And maybe some of that rubbing off on me may have caused me to get interested in the college. And so from time to time, discussion would arise about the college. There was a committee in the association to study the establishment of the college, and I guess that came along. Then there was some efforts on the part of the Des Moines College to move, and there were some efforts out in our part of the country to try to get them to move here. And so it was those things that caused me to become aware. So I guess early in mid-60s is when I became interested in the college, and being one who had just freshly received the benefits of an education made possible through the sacrifices and contributions of my forefathers, I suppose it was those things that caused me to feel like that maybe in some way I ought to give back some of what I've received in the way of efforts and so forth to the establishment of college. And then I guess from there I became interested or became involved in the political administration of the association by being involved with the House of Delegates, and it was through the efforts of Dr. Dan Byer, who's now deceased, that asked me one time, would you serve as I don't remember whether it was a delegate or an alternate delegate or something to the state convention? And I said, well, yes, I would. And so it was through his efforts that got me involved there, then every year at the House of Delegates meeting, we'd receive a report about the committee and the college and so forth. And I guess by the time I was involved there, the college actually had a charter, and they were looking at some way to make that become a real thing. There was a lot of concern on everyone's part. It seemed that in those days we wanted to have a college, but most of us felt that, boy, that's a lot of work, and it's gonna be a big effort. So there was kind of a thing going around then, well, let George do it. Mm-hmm. And of course, our friend George Lubel got that got that title later, let George do it, and George done it, of course. But he was a very shrewd, crafty sort of person that knew who to call on to do certain things to make it all come together. And then I guess my evolution then started when, I think it was early in my activities in the association, I was asked to be on the board of directors, and I guess they were scraping the bottom of the barrel because we were running out of talent in those days, and
that was
surely,
about what year?
Oh, I want to say it was 67 or 8 up in there, and so. So we felt like, or I felt like at that time, that I had a more direct involvement, since I was one of the members of the board who had responsibility for making decisions about the college and what the association would do and how we'd be involved and so forth in the efforts of the college. And it was I guess how I got involved was a unique group of sort of circumstances. Some people over in Arlington, where I practice, I became friends with very early in my professional career, and they were some influential people who knew about the osteopathic profession, and several members of their family came to me for osteopathic treatment, and I guess it was through those contacts that we've established long-lasting friendships with these people, and they were the ones that later ended up being very valuable as far as doing something that helped the college along the way. This was the Vandergrift family, and of course Tom was mayor at that time and had been for many years, and I remember when I went to Arlington, I was interning. I just started my internship over in Grand Prairie, and I had heard a lot about Tom Vandergrift long before I came to the area. While I was in college, I took pre-med up at Wichita Falls at Midwestern University, and I had heard about Tom Vandergrift up there even. And so it was through those things that I wanted to meet the guy that I had heard about. So shortly after I came to Arlington to live there while I interned in Grand Prairie, I just called down one day to his office and told him that I wanted to make an appointment to meet the mayor, and I was new in town, and they just put the mayor on the phone because he always had a policy that he handled his own phone calls and appointments and everything, and I guess still does today as far as I know. So Tom came on the line, and I said, it kind of startled me for a moment, and I said, well, Mr. Mayor, I'm Bobby Smith, and I've just moved to your town, and I've heard about you for a long time, and I just want to meet you sometime. And he said, well, just come on down. So he and I had a long initial visit. We must have talked an hour, and later on, when I discovered how busy the guy was, I felt kind of embarrassed that I'd taken so much of his time, but we became friends, and then later, I don't know how many members of his family I've treated, his father, and I guess all of his children, and I don't know who all from time to time for problems osteopathically that they've had. And so it was a natural for me to look to my close friend for some help with this college thing. And so we did, and I thought, well, if the college is moving along, wanting to get started, if it can say, I've got a place I can hang my hat, I've got a home, then that was a beginning. And I remember that I said to someone, I don't know if it was Tex Roberts or Dick Stratton or someone, that I said, you know, I don't know what in God's green earth I'm doing this for. What can be worse than having a college in your back door to run you crazy with all the problems that'll come up?
Excuse me now, Tex Roberts, he's the executive director of the association.
Yes, Tex came along, I guess, around 1968, 69, in that era.
Mm-hmm.
He came here as executive director from the New Mexico Association.
Dick Stratton, Dr. Stratton.
Was president just prior to me and was a very close friend.
Right.
And so I said to some of these people, I don't know who, you know, you got to be crazy to want a college, especially in your back door. And I hope someday they'd move to Houston or somewhere. But I knew I had this possibility there, and we might as well grasp that. And I said to Tom Vandergrift at the time, I said, now Tom, I don't know what'll ever happen to this, but golly, let's, you know, I appreciate so much you trying to work out something. And he said, well, it'll be no problem. So we went to work on the idea, and as I discussed the possibility that I knew someone that had some land in South Arlington that we could get a sizable quantity of land to build a college, there were those who thought, oh, this is great, it's good, boy, let's go after that. Don't let the sun set till we get that signed over to us. And there were others who said, no, I know where that's at, and you know, it's no more than an unplowed cornfield out there, and we don't want that sort of thing. Well, if you're involved in decision making somewhere, you got to weigh the odds. How many pluses and how many minuses are there here, and make a decision and go. So I didn't want to. The thing I didn't want to do was I didn't want to present a package of land to the college and then have the college turn it down. I felt like that would be very embarrassing if I did. So I felt around, and I felt that there was enough support that maybe at least we'd have a beginning. So the college met, the board was having a meeting, I believe it was in February of 1970, at the Worth Hotel.
Right. Now that was the college board.
The college board, yes. The college board was having a meeting. I believe Dr. Lubel was chairman at that time, and I don't recall who all was on the board, but they were having a meeting, and they always invited the association members to attend. Well, it was about that time that Dr. Richard Stratton, who had formerly practiced down in Cuero, Texas, but he was elected to be president in 69 and 70 for the association, Texas Osteopathic Medical Association. And because his father had retired and he was there all alone, he decided to come up and join me as an associate in practice, and so he did, and it was kind of rumored at that time that I'd be the next president to follow him, and I think I had been elected president-elect by this time, that we kind of worked an arrangement, okay, I will make us a living while you're president if you'll make us a living while I'm president.
I see.
And that's about the way it had to be for us, and I think it's been the same way for all the guys that I've ever, golly, watched go through as president of the association. It's a tremendous sacrifice.
Yes, it is.
I'll never forget the note that I went down to sign for $50,000 to pay my bills when I came home from El Paso after being president, you know. So it's, but it's worth it. I'd never spend that
Don't
money
regret it.
for nothing else. I'm tickled to death that I did, and whatever little bit that the public and that the profession may have gained from my efforts, I gained a lot more.
Right.
You know, if you want to look at the selfish side of it, I received values that money would never buy, that you couldn't see anyway. Well, back to the mainstream here. It was at that meeting in February of 1970, it was on a Sunday morning, that Tom Vandergrift, the mayor of Arlington, and I went to the meeting. And Tom had arranged through his father and a gentleman, an attorney, who was close family friends, the name of Carlisle Cravens. And so Tom's father, Hooker Vandergrift, and Carlisle Cravens owned this property in South Arlington, and they agreed to give a section of it to the college, and certain restrictions about what was to be done with it and so forth were put forth. Well, Tom came to the meeting with me, and I introduced him to the board of the college, and he made the offer, and the board later accepted the offer. And so at that point, in February of 1970, the college had a home. As it turned out to be, it was a temporary home, but you know, when a child is out in the street struggling for a living, if it's got just a tent to put over its head, or if it can land under a bush during some rough storms, its chance of surviving are much greater. I remember another thing that my dad told me one time when I was a boy. He said, "Son, if you ever fall over the side of a cliff, or you get pushed over the side of a cliff, and you're falling down, and there's any kind of little twig sticking out, reach out and grab that thing and hold on, and don't ever let go. Because if you let go, you're just going to hit the bottom. And if you hang on long enough, someone will come along or something will happen that will actually relieve you of your situation." And I thought about, well, this is a home for the college, and I really felt at that time, well, I hope that that it don't really come about out here. I mean, I have to say that personally, I dreaded seeing the college in my back door because of all the sacrifices that I'd probably have to make. And I don't know at that time I was willing to make those sacrifices. And I don't know what pushed me on, but I did. And so the college had a home. And then from there, I think the next problem was to try to get some money for the college, I guess the college really had to get itself established and start a class. That was the next thing.
Well, let me interrupt, if I may, Dr. Smith. You have pretty well covered very graphically the narrative of your involvement and your responsibility with the Cravens Vandergrift gift of land, which, well, it was a must for our survival. There's no doubt about that. But let's go into what you were probably ready to lead into, let me just review for just a minute, because you were president of TOMA in 1970 and 71. Now, the records show that you spent considerable time and effort in behalf of TCOM to receive state financial support. Now, we have a home. We had no income, and so you were responsible, to a great extent, helping the school to receive state support. Will you single out some of your Austin visits and the results that occurred?
Well, yes, there was a meeting, I believe, in I don't remember the year, but there was a meeting like in December between the college board and the TOMA board, and we had a dinner or something to bring everyone together, and the college officially said, we want TOMA to actively pursue and get college funding for us. And I want to say it was in December 1970 is what I think it was, the 17th of December, because we went to work on that effort.
Let me interrupt now. We were already open at that
yes,
time.
In fact,
we were
I believe
operating
you
on
were,
a shoestring.
I believe you were.
We opened in October of that year.
I think your headquarters was in a garage apartment up
Just
on
about.
Montgomery
Little White
Street.
House across the street from
Yes.
Fort Worth Osteopathic. Right.
Something like that.
Right.
Maybe the anatomy lab was in the garage.
It was in the garage. That's
That
right. It was in the garage.
I knew there was a garage apartment
Yeah, there was a
involved,
garage apartment,
and later a bowling alley and
Right.
so forth. But nonetheless, I believe it was George Lubel that often pointed back to the early days of now the great Southwestern Medical School over at Dallas, at how they began in some old abandoned army barracks over there around the Harry Hines area
Right.
of Dallas. So that gave us, caused us to have no shame about operating in a garage apartment, and I guess that house was on Madison, was
Yeah,
it?
right on 3600 Madison,
Yes.
right on the corner of Madison and Montgomery.
Sure.
And then, of course, they used the unused fifth floor, the hospital for the classes and library. And so.
And did we not, at that time, did the college not lease the bowling alley?
Well, we leased it the next year.
Yes,
See,
okay.
the first year we didn't have any problem. The first class.
Just had a few.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the second year we had to do
Yeah.
something with the first year.
Yes, so they had to go someplace to have their second year training. Well, anyway, I believe it was December 17th, 1970, that the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine Board of Directors asked TOMA to assist in getting state funds. And at the time I was president, and there was one thing that complicated this problem some. It was along about this time, and I don't know if we were aware of it at that moment or it was within the next month or so that we became aware of it. We had kind of depended on some people to do our lobbying for us in Austin, and there arose some problems at that time that really troubled me as the president, because I was, I think at that time, maybe the youngest guy that ever come along in the association as president, and youth has oftentimes no experience or nothing to refer to, and that was the case with me, and being very early in my professional career, and having not had the benefit of 20 or 30 years of decision making of others to rely upon, and having sat on boards and boards and boards and watched these things happen, I didn't have a lot of experience in making a decision to go in a certain direction. And so when the news came that the man who was our, quote, lobbyist, close quote, at that time, may be possibly named in some bank scandal or something like this, and it was just possible, we didn't know or anything, and he didn't know exactly how he'd be involved, but he said to me, I believe, or something, I don't recall, that he'd like to stand aside for the time being till the air was clear on that thing. So that left nobody to do the lobbying for our association or to do the footwork in Austin, except myself, who was the president, and Tex Roberts. And I never had involved myself in anything like that. I hardly knew my senator more than, and that was it. And so I guess maybe part of the reason for my success was that I didn't know that you couldn't do it. And I remember when we were celebrating back in Senator Tom Creighton's office from Mineral Wells, who was my senator at that time. We were celebrating back in his office the passage of this bill to get funding for the for the college, and Tom said, "Bobby, the only reason you ever got this bill passed was nobody told you you couldn't." And I really believe that, because if I had known all the obstacles that one has to go through to overcome to get something like this, I'd probably thrown up my hands and left the state or something, because it was just more than I ever could conceive that it would be. Well, we went to work, and so Tex Roberts and I started out, mapped out a plan with the aid of the board of directors of our association, and we began our work in Austin, talking to people. And we used kind of as a guideline, well, some leverage in the thing was that at that time our association was receiving scholarship funds to assist students pursuing an education in osteopathic medicine out of state, because we had not an osteopathic college in Texas. That came about many, many years before through the help of Dr. Elmer Baum, who at that time found out that they were assisting students who were studying forestry out of the state. Forestry. He found out that these students studying forestry got state funding assistance from the state of Texas to pursue their education in forestry, because at that time there was no education offered in forestry by any of the state institutions in Texas. All right, because of that, then he came in and said, "Hey, fellas, here's a group of people that's being pursuing an education out of state. There's no osteopathic college in Texas. How about giving us some funding for this?" And so they began with a very token amount, and slowly it worked up to a sizable quantity of $100,000 a year. And so then we looked at that, and then along about that time, Baylor University College of Medicine in Houston were receiving funds to assist in educating their students there in some way from the state, because they were providing medical education. And I know not what the circumstances were, other than I know they were. So we used those two situations kind of to map out a direction to go in pursuing funding for the college. Then because of that, we got a bill, and our sponsor was Senator Tom Creighton from Mineral Wells at that time, because he was my senator. And I was told by someone down there, the way you start out with a bill is you get your senator to sponsor it, or your state representative to sponsor it. And so at that time, I was kind of a long distance sort of member of his district, because it was such a gerrymandered district. And so we went to Senator Creighton, and he graciously helped us with this, and was kind of my mentor and director of because I recall time and time again he'd call me on the phone, and I'd be back in Arlington trying to make a living for my little children and wife at that time. and he'd call and say, "You better get down here now because this is what's happening." And so Tex Roberts and I'd jump on a plane or get in the car and buzz off down there and do whatever he said do. And because of that, it was just almost like a day-to-day sort of thing, that there was no real plan for tomorrow because you didn't know what tomorrow held.
Right.
And you just had to wait till the sun came up and say, okay, the sun's shining or it's raining, and we got to either wear a raincoat or take a parasol with us or something for the day. And it was just literally that way. Well, golly, thanks to so many people, when we had here and because of their efforts down there, just the sheer grassroots show of strength. One of the things Tom Creighton told me, he said, now, you get somebody from every district, especially of these guys sitting on the committee here. And we carefully picked people from that guy's district, and we, in every instance, I think, picked someone who knew that person. And so they weren't looking at strangers. When they looked out in the audience and they saw Dr. X from my town, in fact, some of them wanted to introduce their doctor friends from their district at the committee hearing. And so there was a lot of this went on. And I remember some of the strange sort of things that happened but it was because of that tremendous, overwhelming show of strength that committee was impressed that these people care about what they're doing. And some of those people on that committee had been treated by some of these physicians back in their territory, and they were aware that these people provide quality health care to people in this community. And that's what we need, because at that time, there was something that really helped us a great deal. There was a tremendous movement toward specialization and super specialization within the medical world. Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted to be a widget 39 specialist or a widget 39 paragraph 6 or something, sub A specialist. Everybody wanted to be a super deal. And so there was nobody out there to provide family care. And for that reason, I think that was on our side, because we could go in and say 70% of all of our graduates from all of our colleges for the last XYZ years have become family practitioners and serving the primary needs of people. And I think that was important in this committee, because I think there were people there who had either they had been burned or some member of their family had been burned by having some unsatisfactory relationship with some person who maybe was a heart specialist when really they needed a toe doctor or something, like that. And that helped us a great deal. And I remember the thing that caused me the most concern that night when we had the committee hearing, because Tex Roberts and I were kind of orchestrating it was like a puppy show or a puppet show or something, somebody had to pull the strings.
Right.
And so we were kind of marching, and we had everybody lined up with the help of Senator Creighton, who comes in and talks when, and I remember we had George Lubel, and I don't recall who else, but we had everybody, we had the show lined up to come on in a certain order. Well, what really threw a clinker in the wheel was a senator from Galveston at that time who was on the committee, a very astute man and very observant, and later became a great friend of our profession. His name was Babe Swartz, and AR, I believe, was his initials. And as we had the hearing, he asked some very pointed questions about this, that, and the other, and it appeared very quickly that we had a problem much greater than we realized, because he had sat in the Senate a long time, and he was one of the senior members of the Senate. Therefore, had very key committee assignments. I didn't know at that time, but in looking back later, I discovered had allegiances from many members of that Senate that owed him favors, that he had helped with many, many things, that he could call on almost anybody there. Now, he was more of a liberal leaning, but he could even call on the arch conservatives such as Senator Creighton and say, I need your help in this, and they were almost obliged to do it, or he would ramshack anything they wanted to do down the road. So as we say in the political world, he had lots of pearls coming to him.
Yeah.
And he could collect these anytime he wanted to. And so we recognized that we had a problem. And his major concern was that they had earlier allocated funds to Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, and he wanted someone to oversee those funds. He wanted the state auditor to be able to look in and say, yes, the state's getting its money's worth here, and this money's being used in accordance to how the directions were given. And apparently somebody at Baylor had kind of nosed him up a little and said, you go jump in the lake. And so he raised some questions at our hearing. Well, I don't want to give money to a bunch of doctors and have them go to Las Vegas and spend it. And I could understand that. So we had a huddle meeting with Senator Creighton after the hearing was over. And Senator Creighton says, well, now, you guys, talking to Tex Roberts and I, you be at his office in the morning about 7 o'clock, because he comes to work early before anybody gets there, and you resolve this thing with him. And if you don't, we got trouble. Well, we went over there, and I remember we were waiting at his front door when he got there, and someone had left his newspaper at the door, and I picked up his newspaper and walked in and followed him right back through his office, and he had a handful of mail and so forth, and he was talking, and we were going, and Tex and I just went right on back in his office with him. And he was the kind of guy that he would have never invited you in, but he had been insulted if you hadn't just followed him right on back. Well, we went back and sat down and started discussing, saying, we are here to try to deal with your concerns about our bill, and what is it about it that you don't like? And his comment was, well, I don't want to do anything to change your bill. It's your bill, and he started kind of backing away, and I just opened up the bill and laid it out in front of him and laid a pencil there and said, now, if there's something you don't like about it, maybe we can make it where it is better, and maybe it's something that we don't know about that we've overlooked. And so he started out saying, well, I don't want to change your bill, but while he was saying that, he was lining out certain things and writing in certain things. So I felt like we had someone then at least responding, and we were getting to the heart of the problem.
Right.
And the problem was simply that he wanted the state auditor to oversee and supervise and be able to at least audit those funds to where he knew the state was getting their money's worth. And that's what we wanted too. And
right.
we had not, in looking at Baylor's bill and looking at all that had transpired before, we had just overlooked this sort of thing. And I think it was a good thing for us as a profession to be answerable to the state, and it was a good thing for the state to assure their constituents that they were getting their money's worth. So that was an interesting thing, and I guess probably the most exciting moment was the actual signing of the bill, and because it really had happened at that time, and that Tom Creighton said, well, we at one point said we can probably get this bill passed now. We've seemed to overcome most of the hurdles, but
who was the governor at that time, Dr. Smith?
Let's see.
Was that Preston Smith?
I believe it was. Preston Smith was the governor. Sure was. And we had some inroads. Now I remember, yeah, we had some inroads to Preston Smith. Dr. Baum and Preston had been all long friends way back when Preston was lieutenant governor, and I guess in the House and the Senate prior to that, they had become friends, and so that gave us an inroad to the governor. Well, what we had to do to really assure some funding right off the bat was we cut an agreement with the, in fact, I think Tom Creighton was on the Senate Finance Committee, and in the final days of all the manipulating that goes on in that committee, he cut a deal with them where we would sacrifice or forego the scholarship funds to out-of-state students, and that we could take that money and put it in the bill, the finance bill, the budget bill for the college, and they added to it an extra $50,000, which gives us $150,000 to operate with that year. And golly, I guess this was a great feeling, because there was literally no hope that we'd get funding if we could just get our foot in the door. But you know, at that time the college was just struggling,
Right.
something awful to survive, no money, and teachers can't teach if they can't feed their family, and so we had to have something to pay the teachers. And I don't know, but I suspect the people at the college felt a great sigh of relief when they finally got a check saying, hey, here's some money to pay some of these people with, and that was a good thing. And of course, the great thing was to see the governor sign the bill and actually bring about something that had been. And so that came on May 17th, 5 months later,
Right.
after, from the day that.
In 1971.
One. Yes, 5 months from the day that we were assigned the job. And Lord, I don't know how it came about in that period of time, because golly, there's been other things I've worked on since that time that I think I know a little about how to do it, but you never know how. But, you know, now that I've had some experience, I've worked on things for 2, 4, 5 years and go down in defeat, you know, and never bring them about. So,
You know, referring to that $150,000, one thing that hadn't been publicly known is that at that particular time, you know, I was a so-called business manager, because
Yes.
we couldn't afford a business manager.
yes, you were everything.
Right. But the point was, we had taken and kept a record of all of the doctors who had donated their time, because we had to have so many clinicians and so many clinical
Yes.
faculty and so forth. Of course, we were paying the basic science faculty
Yes.
their little measly amount that they had agreed to, but we were getting a great deal of input from the doctors.
Yes.
So we kept a record of it.
Uh-huh.
And we did go back and pay them from some of the funds that we got, you see, from the
Yes.
state. We paid them at a $50 an hour honorarium
Yes.
on some of them. So some of them
Yes.
did pick up something that they weren't aware they were going to get.
And probably many of them went back and donated that
They
back to
did. Well, I'm
college.
glad you brought
Yes.
that out, because
Yes.
nearly every one of them endorsed a check and gave it back.
Sure.
That's right.
Sure.
You're right.
And you know, that's amazing. Talking about you were the business manager, I guess between you and Dr. Hart, Henry Hart, y'all were everything.
That's
You-
right. We
you
wore
know,
a lot of hats.
You lay down one hat, pick up another one, and you run over here and fan a little and put that one down and do another one.
I hope I've got a hat on this time it fits. I hope.
Well, it was all. Of course, you know, I think, Ray, so many of these sort of things, like when you're struggling like that, that's really when life's most beautiful. You know, you look back and the toughest, uncertain valleys that we walk through are the most beautiful things in our life. So I think probably establishing the college, although my contribution was so minute compared to a lot of people.
Well, you're being a little too modest there, because it was a pretty strong contribution.
I really look back on my life, and now that I'm 50 years old, and I'm no means getting up in the years, but I know that my life doesn't hold as many days ahead as it did 25 years ago. And
You mean you've got more of a past than you have a future?
that's right. And because of that, probably if this was my last day, and Lord, I don't know if it is, I hope it's not, but if it is, then I'd have to say that my meager contribution to the college was one of the highlights of my lifetime.
Yeah. Well, in that particular vein, Dr. Smith, what single experience do you consider as paramount during your term of office?
As president, oh, I think no doubt. Although you see, when the bill was signed by the governor, no doubt that was the single greatest thing. Although it was, I don't know, maybe it was a few days before, a few days after my term had expired, but it was right around that time. And that was the greatest thing that I think that our profession, because it done a number of things. It gave us a way to reproduce our kind in the future. And it gave us financial base to do that with. But I think far more, even greater than all of those things, our profession was sort of divided at that time. Because there was a lot of uncertainty, and I say I mean in the state of Texas. There was a lot of diversity and a lot of indecision about, should we do this college thing or should we not?
Right.
And there were times, frankly, that I felt like during my administration, boy, I've just pushed this thing over the hill in the wrong direction, and it's gonna haunt us all. Well, thank goodness it didn't. But there was a lot of diversity among the profession. Well, this thing kind of brought us together. There was when times are the toughest, I remember my father talking about during the years of the Great Depression of the late 20s and early 30s, he said this brought his family closer together than anything that ever happened to him. And he said if there was anything good from that, that's what it was. Well, I think if there's anything good from this, maybe it was a beginning of a bringing together of the profession, because I think we have a very harmonious profession today.
Right.
And maybe that was the beginning of it, because it gave us something at least to rally around. Either you were for it or you were against it. But it was a rallying cause, and it was a worthwhile cause. So the greatest thing that I think that happened to me, that I was the most excited about, was seeing that bill signed and say, hey, we got some money now, we can go, and it has some hope for the future.
And it certainly opened the door for the current condition that exists today as our being a part of the state system.
Well, it was a beginning.
It was the beginning of making it possible for us to be accepted into the state community.
And
what would you say, Dr. Smith, for what would you best like to be remembered?
oh, that's.
And I don't mean that from any egotistical point of view or anything of that nature, but just.
I guess if there was anything that it'd go back to something I remarked about earlier. It'd be back to I was very, very close to my father, who has long since passed on to his great reward in the sky. But I guess it would be probably what my dad told me when I was a boy growing up, just that statement I made earlier. He said, son, if it's said of you that you give more than you received while you were on this earth, then your journey will have been worthwhile. And I think my little contribution in the college, the profession has been so good to me and my family. It's allowed me to to provide a comfortable living for my family, and it's allowed me to do it in a way that I can say that I have truly helped others. Now, I haven't helped everybody that's ever come to me, but I don't know any physician that ever did.
Right.
Maybe except the one that they hung on the cross. But it's allowed me to help people, and in doing that, it's allowed me to provide for my family. And I think what little part I had in the college maybe carried out some of what my father said, and that is, as others come into the profession, then they have the same sort of opportunities that I had, and so it's a way of perpetuating my kind. I think is what has been an outstanding sort of thing to me. And again, I say, I reemphasize that compared to the whole thing, mine was oh so little, but it was a part at a time that it needed to be, and I'm sure it was something that anybody could have done who came along if they didn't know it couldn't be done. If they didn't know it couldn't be done, they probably could have done it. But I'm just grateful that, that I came along at that time. It was a time that and I'm a great believer that there's a master plan in all of our lives, and that was part of the master's plan for me to come along at that time, and I'm grateful that I just had enough insight to vaguely respond to it and be a part of something that will live on and on. And I guess the only two ways we have of passing our life on to others is by what we give to the earth, and then through our children, and so that's where I see the thing at.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bobby Smith, for this very fine interview. And we're grateful to you for your taking the time and your consideration in giving us this opportunity.